As mentioned in the last video, in the next update we'll be focusing on robotics and sci-fi sound effects. The plugin already supports most of the elements behind these effects, like UI sounds, clicks, and engine noises. But robotic voicing, which is often used to create that imperfect human-like AI speech, is still something we haven't fully developed yet. So in this upcoming update, we're adding a Voice Vocoder node to help with that. As you might know, one simple way to make a robotic voice is to use a delay node with a high feedback gain to create a comb filter effect. In this tutorial, we'll build a graph to generate wind sound effects. But this makes it hard to control the tone timbre and decaying speed. A more flexible way to do robotic voicing is using a voice vocoder. We prefixed this node with SF because the default settings are tuned for sci-fi sounds. This node takes in two audio inputs, the modulator and the carrier. By default, the number of filter bands is set to 32. That means the modulator signal is passed through 32 bandpass filters, splitting it into 32 frequency bands. Then the envelopes from those bands are extracted using a simple local max method. The size of that local max tracking window is controlled this parameter. In short, we will create 32 envelope signals from the modulator. Next, the carrier signal also goes through 32 bandpass filters, but this time the gain of each band follows the envelopes we just extracted. Finally, we mix the outputs of all those filters together to create the final sound. Alright, let's try it out with some audio and see how it behaves. I'll add a WavePlayer node here and use a sentence from the tutorial 10. For the carrier, we'll need something tonal, so I'll use a buffalo sound for this demo. So the envelopes from the modulator are transferred to the carrier. By default, 32 bands work pretty well for robotic voices, but it's actually quite low compared to conventional voice vocoders. In DAW, those usually run between 128 and 256 bands. The more bands you use, the clearer the result. Though of course, they'd also cost more processing power. Now, Fmin is the lowest frequency band, and Fmax is the highest one. Since both the modulator and carrier mostly focus on the low to mid frequencies, we can just set Fmax to around 3000 Hz. The frequency spread parameter controls how the bands are distributed. It works similarly to the modal explosify and reverb nodes. And remember, we never divide frequency bands linearly. Instead, we follow a log-mel curve which focuses on the ranges humans actually hear best. Before changing this parameter, let's change the carrier signal to make it even more robotics. You can easily make a tone signal using chirps and fast nodes. I'll use a modal object with a 1000 Hz tone and 3 harmonics. Set the decay scale and chirp rate to 0 because we want a steady, non-stopping tone. I'll also shift the pitch down by 12 semitones since the modulator is a male voice. Then I'll duplicate it, change the pitch to -6, and multiply the two before feeding them into the carrier input. That's a very cheap way to add some extra harmonics. In this tutorial, we'll build a graph to generate wind sound effects. If you raise the frequency spread to around 1.5, you'll get more bands in the mid to high range and fewer in the low end. That makes the pitch feel higher, though it also drops the perceived loudness. In this tutorial, we'll build a graph to generate wind sound effects. Now, let's switch to a female voice for stronger mid and high frequency envelopes.
This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate.
This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate. This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate.
Lowering the frequency spread shifts the timbre downward.
This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate.
The decay parameter controls the feedback gain of the filters. The default settings work well for most audio, but if you want more of that metallic reverb tail, you can reduce the decay modulator value.
This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate.
In general, the number of bands, Fmax, and frequency spread are the three parameters you'll adjust based on your modulator and carrier. Right now, our carrier is just a clean tone, so it sounds very robotic. If you want something a bit more human, try adding some noise into the tone. For example, let's use white noise as the carrier. I'll also bump the number of bands up to 48 and set Fmax to 6000 Hz.
This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate.
Now it kind of sounds like an old radio or phone speaker. You can also use source synthesizers to make more complex carrier signals. Let's try an impact external force synth node. To switch between modal objects more easily, I'll add a loudness adjustment node. Let's use the metal box model for now. Here's how it sounds on its own. Now let's plug that into the carrier.
This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate.
You can really hear that metallic box resonance now. To add more noise, just increase the decay scale.
This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate.
You can adjust the tone by changing the pitch.
This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate. This is a very boring.
And tweak the timbre by setting the frequency spread to around 1.5.
This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate. This is a very boring speech.
You can even diffuse the carrier a bit by using an LFO to modulate the pitch. I set the LFO frequency to 25 Hz here, but feel free to experiment with other values. You could also use a low frequency noise node here instead of an LFO.
This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate. This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate. This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate. This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate. This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate. This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate. This is a very boring speech. This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate. This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate. This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate.
Although this node was designed mainly for robotic voices, you can use it for lots of other interesting effects too. For example, if you reduce the decay modulator to 10, it can sound like a whole announcer.
This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate.
Voice vocoders are also used a lot in music to create vocal effects. I don't have a clean vocal track here for the modulator, so I'll just use this Google voice. For the carrier, the anguish track should work fine. If you're going for non-robotic vocoding, you'll want to raise the number of bands to 64 or more.
This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate. This is a very boring speech that I generated with Google Translate.
It would sound even better if the vocal and carrier were matched to the beat, but hopefully you get the idea. You can think of this node as a way to filter one audio signal using another. For instance, I can create a new creature voice effect by using the buffalo track as the modulator and a white noise as the carrier. Since we're going for something organic, not robotic, let's set the number of bands to 256 for the best quality. And of course, you can use different tonal signals like before. All in all, this is a really powerful node for vocal effects. It's one of the big highlights of the next update. I hope you found this video helpful. Bye for now, and I'll see you again when another update is ready.